Today's story is called Just Awful by Alma Marshak Whitney. It's about a little boy called James. It was just after lunch when it happened. James cut his finger in the school playground. It hurt and it bled a little. James felt just awful. He went to see his teacher, Mrs. Smith. "What happened?" she said. "I cut my finger," said James. "It's bleeding a little and it hurts too." "Oh," said Mrs. Smith. "I see. Well, how do you feel?" "Just awful," said James. "I think you'd better go and see the nurse," said Mrs. Smith. "I'll write a note for you so that you can go straight away." James felt worse than ever. He'd never been to the nurse before. He was scared. When James got to the nurse's room, he sat down next to a stomachache and a sore toe. The stomachache went in to see the nurse. James was left with a sore toe. Then the stomachache came out of the nurse's room. He had a big smile on his face. "Oh, I wish I had a stomachache instead of a cut finger," thought James. The nurse came to the door and asked the sore toe to come inside. The sore toe went in to see the nurse. Now James was left all alone. Things were at their worst. Then the sore toe came out of the nurse's room and she had a big smile on her face. "Oh, I wish I had a sore toe instead of a cut finger," thought James. And then the nurse came to the door and asked James to come inside. "Well, what happened to you, James?" said the nurse. She was a jolly nurse. So James told her the whole story. He told her about the playground and his finger and about how he felt just awful. The nurse examined the finger very carefully. "Oh, I think you're going to be all right," smiled the nurse, "but I would like to give you the 3-part treatment, just in case." "The what?" said James, and he hid his hands behind his back. "It is not bad at all," the nurse said, as she led James to the sink. "The first part is the cleaning," and she put his finger under some warm water. It really was not bad at all. The finger did not hurt, it was just a little warm and wet. Then the nurse took a great big sticking plaster out of a box. "Next comes the bandaging," she said, and she wrapped the great big plaster around the finger until James could hardly see it anymore. James was really feeling much better. "And now," said the nurse, "the most important part of all." "Are you sure it is so important?" said James. He had no idea what would happen next. He started feeling awful again. "Oh yes, very important," said the nurse. "Now come over here and I will give it to you." James started walking very slowly towards the nurse. What would become of him? Just as he got to the nurse, she reached out to James and gave him a great big hug. "Oh boy," laughed James. "Yippee, I feel terrific," said James. "Well, I think you can go back to your class," said the nurse. When James got back to his class, Mrs. Smith asked him how he felt. "I think I'm going to be all right," said James.